So many moms feel stuck and isolated, like they've got to keep it all together and can't say how hard it really is. On Let's Get Real, we talk about the real stuff, motherhood, mental health, and everything in between, so you don't feel like you have to carry it alone anymore. Because in order to heal, we have to get real. If you're feeling overwhelmed, grab the Overwhelmed Moms Guide. It's totally free and made to help you feel like yourself again. The link is in the show notes. Let's jump in. Birth is one of the most powerful transitions of a woman's life, yet so many mothers walk away from it feeling unheard, scared, or disconnected from their own bodies. In a time when maternal mental health struggles are rising and medical systems are stretched thin, families are craving emotional safety, informed choices, and someone who can anchor the room with calm. What if birth didn't have to feel chaotic or disempowering, but deeply human, supported, and sacred? Today, we're joined by Suzzie Vehrs, a birth and postpartum doula whose journey began after witnessing firsthand how compassionate care can completely transform the way a family experiences birth. Suzzie has devoted her work to helping parents trust their instincts, navigate medical systems confidently, and feel seen and supported in the moments that matter most. Whether she's guiding first-time parents or walking along someone healing from a traumatic birth, her approach is grounded in empathy, advocacy, and a deep belief that birth is more than a medical event. It's an emotional and spiritual experience. Suzzie, thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited to get to explore this topic more on doulas and really having an advocate in the rooms that so many moms need. And so I cannot wait to expand and explore this topic with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and I hope we get to learn a little bit about your births and your experiences as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's going to be very fascinating. I'm excited too. Well, as we get started, can you share a little bit of what led you to the work that you do today?
Yeah, so I have two amazing daughters. They came into the world in wildly different ways. And then I had one miscarriage before that, which ended up being this very wild thing called a molar pregnancy, which is basically the placenta's growing cancerously. And so the pregnancy is not viable. And then you have a lot of medical follow-up. So my first daughter, Zoe, was born via an emergency C-section. I had already had a loss. I kind of thought pregnancy and birth was wild and scary, and I just knew what could go wrong. And then I joined a new moms group, and I became very good friends with this amazing woman. Her son was the same age as my daughter, and she was a student midwife. So as we would go hiking and go out on these little adventures together, I'd see little snippets of what was going on with her clients and her families, and I'd realize I was so stuck in the fear of what could go wrong and the energy of I'm just going to use the word trauma around both of those experiences, that I felt I was not open to any joy in my birth experiences. And I saw that there was maybe another way. And I became curious about that. I started reading more about birth, learning more about birth. And then flash forward 4 years later, I had my daughter Hazel. I got so lucky because I had the most ideal birth experience ever. Her birth was so easy, natural birth. She was a 10-pound baby, but by far the easiest experience I had with pregnancy, birth, postpartum, the entire thing. I was like, oh my God, I could do this a million more times. Except 4 kids are very expensive. I don't have the resources for all the kids I want. But I knew how to water birth with Hazel. And by the time I was stepping out of the birth tub, I had her in my arms, and I was like, oh my God, I am madly in love with my family. And I also knew that I was going to spend the rest of my life somehow working with mothers in this transition to motherhood. And so my initial plan was to be a doula, do that until I became a midwife. But then I was a doula and really understood how unique that role is. And I fell in love with all the things you get to do as a doula. And so 6 years later, here I am, still doulaing.
Wow. Yeah. It's helpful to hear your story and how you painted the picture of these two very different experiences. And even with the pregnancy that you had prior to was it Hazel? That's your oldest? Or
Zoe is my oldest. Hazel's the younger one.
Okay, because even with that, the miscarriage that you had with that, I just painting these two different pictures of really how much grief and difficulty and you said trauma can be around pregnancy and birth. Then you got to experience this other opportunity of the joy of that, where it doesn't have to be as daunting and terrifying, and really all around can be a beautiful experience. I think having those two, it's very hopeful to hear. And I'm thinking of a couple of friends that they were wanting to be able to have, whether it was a natural birth at a birthing center or a vaginal birth and not a C-section, but then having to get rushed into emergency C-sections. And with that, they had healthy babies, but there was so much grief on the other side because their birth experience was not what they wanted. And I've heard both of them talk how it's not talked about much of the grief around that, how like you long for this experience and then it doesn't happen the way that you desired. And it was important to you. It mattered to these women. And it's really neat to hear you shed light on this and really talk about the experience, even when you do have healthy kids, healthy babies, but just the whole birth experience from pregnancy, postpartum, and therefore the things that we as women carry and need to acknowledge so that we can really heal and move forward and get to experience something different, right?
Yeah. And when I had those more difficult experiences, I didn't really have enough. It was my first experience with grief and my first experience with loss, and the first time that I realized that you have a relationship with your emotions and with realities of life. You have a relationship with uncertainty, and that matters because I went through those experiences and the conclusions I drew were not necessarily, I didn't believe this is my fault, I did something wrong. But there was a part of me that felt, did my body fail me? Did the system fail me? What happened that these were so difficult? And I didn't really have enough even words to understand necessarily what I was feeling when I was in that moment of loss. And I just felt not right. Something hadn't. It was really hard to even put words to what I was experiencing.
Yes, definitely. I could see that. How it is really hard to name those experiences, to name the feelings, to name the beliefs, because even you said it wasn't necessarily shame on yourself or feeling I personally failed, but what happened to my body and the breakdown, what you just described of the hope of what's possible and the reality, because those two things collide. And my own, with my daughter, my youngest, experience and some other friends, again, as we've talked about this, we've read books and okay, like your body knows what to do. It can push your baby out. You can trust your body to do it. But then the reality is that also sometimes our bodies do break down and it doesn't work the way that I was hoping or thought it would. And it's this duality that is really hard to hold and so the struggle in that of the feeling of failure, but it's like, I didn't fail. I didn't choose this, but it feels my body did. And there's just so many mixed emotions that come with different situations that we find ourselves in around birth and all of that.
Yeah. And in the natural birth world, there's a lot of, when we think about having a C-section and a C-section that you're not planning, not only is it that your birth is different, but if there is maybe a mental or emotional accomplishment with having the vaginal birth, and then you have a C-section, there's a loss there. And as educators, people who talk about birth, sometimes we talk about C-sections as being inferior instead of being equal to. And some of that is because C-sections really do have lifelong consequences for mothers and babies. So for those of us that are working with moms who are trying to deliver, I do want to help moms have vaginal births because C-sections do come with things, increased risk for diabetes for the babies, increased risks for colic, and just having a more difficult pregnancy, allergies, more hospitalizations throughout childhood. These are not small little things. And moms are more likely to have pain 3 months, 6 months after a C-section birth than a vaginal birth. So C-sections do come with these measurable difficulties for mothers. But when we are teaching about C-sections or talking about natural birth, a lot of moms feel they don't know that that's why people care about C-sections versus vaginal birth. There's this just acceptance of this one type of birth is quote unquote better. And so you feel better or worse for having one, but you don't really understand that it's not about, there's so many little nuances. For me, there was some weird social status thing about having a C-section instead of having a vaginal birth because I was the only one in my friend group. There were 5 of us that were really close that had babies in the same month. And I was the only one that had a C-section. And that was really weird. I was like, I didn't understand. It took me a long time to figure out that's what it was, feeling inferior for some reason. And it wasn't until later that I realized, well, I actually had to go through more. And so I should be like have more pride in myself. But we don't really give mothers that have C-sections resources to handle these extra things that come their way. So.
Yes, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. And just what you said with being under-resourced in a lot of ways, and even in the extreme amount of information that we have, I still feel like there's a lot that is not shared or spoken about or just easily accessible to be able to read or learn about or whatever, as far as more support, more resources on the back end after birth, or just being able to help navigate those unique challenges, even just physically. Because with my daughter, I had a C-section with her, and I just remember feeling like I was, right before I had her, I was scouring for books, being there has to be something to help me understand how I can heal better in the, fourth trimester, just postpartum. I found just a couple books, and I'm sure there's more than that, but the ones that I was really looking for that I felt pretty quality. But I was just shocked at how little information is out there on, to really help you navigate this. Because if you've never been through it, or you don't have other friends that have walked a similar path, is this normal? Am I okay? And I'm sorry, but we need more than just a 6-week or an 8-week checkup postpartum. We need so much more care and support along the way after we give birth. So I'm really glad that you spoke to this. I'm curious, what have you seen as parents do get closer to birth with some of those common emotional struggles that come up most often?
Yeah, well, I am in Seattle, and a lot of the mothers here have waited till they're older to have babies, which is a beautiful thing. It's really smart to come into pregnancy, having your financial life in order and knowing your plans. But in our system now, once you're 35 or older, you're kind of labeled advanced maternal age. I hate that term, but you do get a lot more pressure for things like inductions, less patience in birth. The C-section rates do go up with age inside the hospital system. The community birth doesn't show that same difference from mothers in that category. So that's being with a midwife in a birth center, or a home birth where a midwife comes to you. But that means that for the women I'm working with, they can have these plans that they've dreamed about for a decade, and they're getting to the end of their pregnancy and they're getting challenged on that. They're being told, because of your age, you should induce. And there is a very small increase in the risk of stillbirth with age and with gestation. So it's still safer than driving your car to stay pregnant if you're over that age, and wanting to carry until your body goes into labor. It's very, in my opinion, and in most of the areas that value natural birth and the natural processes around labor do. But in the medical system, it's you're 35, you induce at 39 weeks. And so the moms that I work with, they often find themselves in a place where they have to ask themselves, am I okay with this change in plans? Does it serve me? Does it serve my baby? Do I have resources if I want to wait? Do I have support if I want to wait? And the answers to that actually vary with who their provider is, where they've decided to give birth. The pressures of your family and your significant other also go into that decision as well. It's very difficult to have dreams that you realize might have to change for a priority you have, if that's safety, or if the risk aversion is different for one person in a couple than another. That can create a little bit of conflict, and some conversation needs to happen to bring everyone to the same page and go through those emotional processes of coming together.
Well, and I can see how the role that you play, I would imagine, I would love to hear you expand on it too, but even in the midst of working through some of those emotions of, hey, this is what I was dreaming and hoping and desiring, but then this risk has been presented and now my doctor's talking to me about this and I'm having a hard time bumping up against that. Do you come in at that point, or have you helped navigate some of those conversations and just acknowledge that and work with your clients and in just working through those emotions that come up, or the feelings of disappointment? Is that something that you'll do with clients?
Yeah, and it's different for every family. There are some clients I have gone to prenatal appointments with because if they're really, really valuing their original plan and they're wanting to confirm, is this a medical reason or is this a risk aversion or about the convenience of scheduling a date for the hospital. Some moms like to have more detailed conversations with their doctors and want to get more into their health and, learn how to do kick counts and learn how to advocate for more like monitoring sessions so they can continue their pregnancy, but maybe be monitored 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure that their baby's doing well. Other moms know like, okay, I have decided I want to induce even though it was not my original plan. And then we can talk about, okay, well, if you're to prepare for your natural birth, you probably did a lot of internal work. And then we have conversations about how do we maybe build a bridge between what you needed for your natural birth to what you're going to need in an induction, because inductions can be longer. Sometimes the pain is a little bit higher because you're using medications to push your body forwards and you're trying to really do in a day or 2, maybe 3, the changes your body would have made gradually over a week or 2, and then in that leap of labor, right? And so how do you bring patience into that? How do you bring peace into that? How do you create pockets for fun and excitement and connection? We have conversations about how are you going to cope with the pain? When do you know if you're going to pivot or ask for an epidural? What do we do after an epidural to, again, bring that sense of lightness and joy and fun back into your birth, while also being proactive with the things that help your baby after you have an epidural, with the movements and positions and the things that help support your baby's rotation in the pelvis, because the baby has an important job in labor too, where they're coming down into your pelvis and they have to do all these turning things and find their way out too. And at the same time that your body's dilating and opening and your uterus is putting all that pressure on them, right? So how do we help bring in the things that you probably would have done without an epidural, but now that you don't have movement, now that you don't have gravity, now that you don't have that? Unfortunately, when you're coping with the pain of contractions, most people move a lot. And then with an epidural, you're in bed most usually on your back or on your side or one position. So try to recoup some of that movement, which really reduces C-section rates. There's a great company called Spinning Babies that has all these little tips and tricks for how to bring movement and positions in, and it works really well after epidurals when they go into hospitals and look at C-section rates with the movement versus without. They bring it down 10, 15, 20% sometimes just through very simple movements. So trying to do like the natural things to keep things on course. And then we're celebrating whether we go to a C-section or whether we have a vaginal birth. There is sometimes grief if you go through a long labor and you end up in a C-section anyways. There is usually fear about a C-section, and having a doula there means that you have somebody that's there to talk to you about what's about to happen, hold your hand while it's happening. And then I don't know how your C-section was, but I know like in mine, my reaction to the medication, like I literally felt I was dying under that much anesthesia. It was very scary, but he talked me through it. Nobody told me I was going to be okay. I was in a C-section because I knew both me and my daughter. So to be having these like very physical experiences where your body's shaking and you're throwing up and you don't have any energy and you have this brain fog and I can't describe the feeling. It was so terrible. I literally did not know if I was dying, I would have thought.
Which
and
is
sometimes
awful.
People feel that in C-sections. And as a doula, even though you can't necessarily take away that physical experience, because you're in a lot of medications to not be able to feel a surgery and still be awake, be able to explain what you're feeling, why you're feeling, that it's going to go away, that you're not in danger, that it's okay to be afraid, to guide people through sometimes some visualizations to help them move the fear out of their body, and then help them reconnect with their baby with that skin to skin time as soon as possible when they're here. That's my favorite after surgery.
So good. Gosh, I'm glad that you were able to describe that in the different settings and situations, and even thinking what you're just talking about at the end, if you do go through something where you were not expecting it, and it can feel very overwhelming, it can feel terrifying, but that's also the power of presence and the power of having someone like yourself who is able to physically be there with you and care for you, look at you in the eyes, get down on eye level. You're going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I know this isn't what you wanted, but this is why. And like, you're not alone. And I think we don't realize how much as humans, that is a core need we have, and something that can be so jarring and scary, where we just need to know we're not alone. And I've heard of, even as I've spoken to other therapists, and this one in particular who's talking about working with her clients through trauma, and how so often what she sees as the key theme for clients in experiencing a traumatic event is the feeling that they were alone. And what you bring, and not only advocating and helping bring guidance and guide them through something that's a lot. It can be very overwhelming, a lot out of your control. Not only having someone that you know is on your side and is there for you advocating, but also having your presence in the midst of something going a way that you weren't hoping it would go. And that can be so underestimated, but is incredibly powerful. And it's the way that we're wired as humans, as a need that we have, and something that. So I'm really glad that you're able to speak to those different ways that you're able to show up and really be there for your clients, from pregnancy to birth to postpartum. I'm curious to learn a little bit more and hear, what are some of the unseen barriers that parents often run into during labor that a doula will help them navigate?
Yeah, my goodness. There's so many. In the hospitals can be very busy systems, and you have a doctor who has many patients. They're not just taking care of you. You have a nurse that might be one-on-one, but might have 2 or 3 other patients they're taking care of. And sometimes one of the biggest obstacles is that a hospital is run both on what's best for the mom and baby, but also what's possible with limited resources. And sometimes in labor, for example, in inductions, a medication that's often used is Pitocin. And Pitocin can, if there's too much of it, it can affect a baby's heart rate. And if a baby's heart rate is having little dips and getting worse and worse and worse, then you're going to go to a C-section. With Pitocin, sometimes if you turn it off and take a break, the baby can recover. And sometimes the reason that it's getting hard on the baby is because contractions are getting too strong. So in cases like that, sometimes having a doula there, it's not, well, having your medical providers, it's not necessarily that they're not watching you, that they're not paying attention to what's going on, but they might have already slated you as the next person in the OR, so they're not still troubleshooting how do we get to a vaginal birth, right? Because to them, again, with limited resources and the availability of the operating room, it's so much easier if your case is closed in an hour in a safe way, which is a C-section, right? And so sometimes having a doula there, we can notice that that's going on, and we can create space for a conversation about it. That can be calling a doctor to the bedside, asking, are there other options other than a C-section? Can we turn off the Pitocin? Is that an option that would be appropriate for this moment? And creating space for that conversation to even take place. And sometimes you do a couple things to try to help a baby, and they recover and you go on to have a vaginal birth. And sometimes you do those things and they're still looking a little stressed out and you tried. But even in those cases where you try and you still go to surgery, there is a little bit of more empowerment in those stories because you were able to try and you knew that that was really the best thing for your baby.
Yeah.
So there are times that where you're actually advocating for more medical attention or more nuance in your care, more personalized care. Also in labor, everybody has a job. In any good team, everyone has a defined role and a defined, this is what their job is. And then a lot of people don't realize that in the hospital system, your doctor's job is mainly prescribing medication and doing surgeries, catching the baby, doing repairs. Your nurse's job is mainly monitoring you, charting what's going on, actually giving out the medication if you've been prescribed anything. It is your job to move, to cope with contractions, to eat, to try to get rest, to know how you're going to handle the waves of labor. There's not really anybody whose job it is to be with you in that unless you bring a doula. And a doula then your Sherpa who knows, yeah, your contractions are different now because you moved from early labor to active labor. Or, oh, it is really hard right now because you're in transition, but you're going to be pushing in 15 minutes. So here's a little bit of encouragement to keep going. And in that case, just giving more, you're helping people anticipate what's coming next, but also helping them stay in the present moment in that way that allows them to do the breathing, do the movements, do the swaying, cope with the fact that it all feels a little bit out of control in labor always, but help you control the things that are in your power and surrender to the rest.
Yeah, that's so great that you defined the roles. That's really helpful to hear. each person has a role to play because, for example, with the nurses, they're there to coach me through, right? And it's not understanding the nuance in between.
Right.
And not realizing, okay, here's the role of the doctor, here's the role of the nurse, and they have so many other patients that they're working with too, where they can't just be with you the duration of your pregnancy or your labor, but then seeing the role that you play as a doula. I love the word that you said, Sherpa, there to coach you through, there to prepare you, and for the nuances of those changes that happen. If it's in between an hour of your nurse not being there or 2 hours, that gap where you would be by yourself. And in that, it is scary still. What is happening? My body's changing, and each delivery even is different. You're not going to have the same carbon copy from one delivery to the next. It's really neat and helpful to understand what roles each person plays and to have that extra support and that extra, hey, I'm going to be encouraged through this because it's more than physical. You need this, it's emotional, it's this spiritual experience, and we need that encouragement to help us keep going. It requires a lot of mental strength. There's so much more beyond physical. So to have somebody there who's like, I'm not leaving your side unless I have to pee, but that's it. Like, I'm going to be with you. And it's just really such a would ease so much of the fear. It would ease so much of the weight of, again, aloneness or being, what's going to happen next?
And it's really difficult I have so much compassion for the medical staff as well, because not only are they taking care of multiple people usually, but also they have literally never met you before. You're a complete stranger. And so to understand the nuances of does laughter and jokes help you or offend you? Do you pray? Do you seek God? Do you meditate? Do you chant? How do you cope with stress? They have no idea. They've never met you before. And you can't really ask somebody in labor about what do you need, because your needs need to be anticipated the further you get into labor. So it's a lot to ask for a nurse to attune differently to every woman when she's never had a chance to build a relationship with that woman before. They try really hard. I truly believe they do. They work so hard, but they also have a lot of clinical tasks. So I think it's complex to be in a system where you're having lots of women birth at the same time, but you're trying to have your own experience that matters and is unique, and you can't predict everything that's going to happen, and you have to love how it's unfolding, but also have planned. It's more complicated than most people think.
Right. That is a great point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but how true it is. This is the first time they're meeting you. And again, managing a caseload of multiple patients. There's, for one person, one nurse, there's only so much that they can do as a human. So I'm glad that you spoke to that and brought that up. I'm curious to hear a little bit more of when a family does have a difficult or a traumatic birth, how do you help them begin to process and heal from that experience?
Yeah, and even a birth that goes perfectly can leave some emotional aftermath. That when you enter motherhood, there's a whole metamorphosis that happens in who you are. There's a beautiful phrase that I have heard. They say when you give birth, you meet your baby and you meet yourself as a new person. For me, as a doula, I've redesigned my packages so that everybody gets postpartum support, because when I was a new doula, I would have even these amazing births, and then I'd follow up with people 2, 3, 4 months later and be like, oh my God, you're suffering right now in motherhood. This transition has been really hard for you. And so now I have 6 visits, 4 hours long each, so 24 hours that they can use within that first 6 months. And I have it that longer period because a lot of people don't realize that postpartum depression peaks around 3 or 4 months. The challenges of a newborn change at 3 months. The first month you have one baby, at 3 months you have another, and 6 months it's completely different again. You're in this constant state of change, and things within couples change, right? Over time too, as you're trying to balance all these different needs for the first time. The trauma is processed a lot easier when moms have food and sleep and rest, which are like incredibly rare resources in the newborn era. It's so hard to get the basics. So a lot of postpartum care is about making sure that you're getting a chance to talk to somebody about what you're really experiencing, that you're having space to take care of your basic needs. And then if someone had a truly traumatic birth, or they're suffering from PTSD or depression, then I typically refer them to a therapist or someone who can do some somatic work with them, because trauma needs to be processed and moved out of the body, or else the stress cycle just stays open and then we get that underlying high tension.
Yes, that's so good. That's amazing. I love that you include that in your packages, because I do, again, what I was saying earlier, I feel that's missed, and how challenging that transition is. And even when it's great transitions, right? Whether we're getting married or going off to college. And then when we have kids, transitions are really hard, even good ones. And especially when you have a child, because of the way our culture is set up, where we are so individualistic, we are not, you really have to be intentional to build out your village, build out the resources and the support that you need. It is not there for you to be able to just go right in. It takes a lot of bandwidth until you're in it. And then it's still hard to name it. So having someone be like, hey, these are the common themes that I see, or the common struggles, and these are the basics. If we can figure out a way to get that, it's going to help with these side effects that stem from that. And then depression, and even with PTSD, then we'll have the space and you'll be able to process this quicker, more easily, rather than what tends to happen is that stuff all just gets delayed. And we just postpone it because we don't have the resources to do it, to be able to get these basic needs met. And then what do we know? Again, here we are, we're pregnant with the next baby. And it's just this cycle where we can't seem to get out of it. So I love that you really provide that in the care that you give to your clients.
Yeah, and with the postpartum care especially, it allows moms to seek sometimes even additional care. Sometimes while I'm watching the baby, moms will work with a physical therapist, or they will go to therapy, or they'll go get their nails done, or they'll having that space to, one, it's 4 hours, so you can take a nap, then you can go somewhere, then we can talk about, okay, what is this challenge with breastfeeding or bottle feeding, or find a little, sometimes things are so easy to fix when you have experience, but when you've never done it before, it's so overwhelming and it stops you in your track. I was working with one family who the dad was actually saying he was bottle feeding the baby, and he was like, I don't understand, the baby doesn't like me. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he was like, well, I tried to feed her. She won't take the bottle. She cries incessantly. And I was like, I had that in the back of my head. I was taking care of the baby. I had to give the bottle. And when I picked up the bottle, I realized immediately this is the type of bottle that's known for, has caused problems with delayed growth and all these things, because it's really hard for the babies to get milk out of. And so I was like, oh, let's Instacart these new nipples for them from Target. So by the time they got back, we had new nipples and a bottle that the baby would take, which when you think about it, when we have these problems in parenting, something so simple, right? How are they as first-time parents supposed to know that? And yet now the dad's thinking the baby doesn't like me. I'm not good enough for my family. And I feel a lot of the challenges we face in parenthood sometimes result in those definitions about ourselves that have nothing, they shouldn't ever be connected, but they do. If every time you feed your baby, they are upset, it's normal to reach that conclusion when that's not the right. There was something else.
Oh my gosh, it's tremendously valuable just to have somebody who's been through that, because there are so many aspects to this that could contribute to something that then we take personally. And that I would imagine a lot of times, it's not the case. It's something more practical like that. Let's find a different nipple for the bottle that is easier for this infant to be able to drink out of. But again, when you're in the thick of it with a newborn, it's just this exhaustion. You're literally just in the bare bones of survival, and there is not the space or the bandwidth to be able to think through that stuff. And I remember being blown away at how many questions I had, and even with all these years I had babysitting and nannying for infants and all the way, through elementary school, And just being like, and still, there were so many questions and things that I couldn't understand. But when you go through it the first time and you just have all these demands, you literally, your brain, I cannot get to that. So having somebody else who has a fully functioning brain at the moment, who's rested and like all those things,
Right.
step in to give you the guidance. It's like, I need guidance. I need support. I don't know what to do. I can't think through it. My husband's exhausted too. So please help us. You just can see it is incredibly valuable to be able to come in and receive that help and that level of care. I'm really glad that you shared that.
It's like, I think as modern parents, we want to be prepared for everything. So I see a lot of parents, they're reading and they're watching the Instagram videos and they're trying to memorize everything. But then every baby is so different too. I remember after I had Zoe, she was a colicky baby. She never slept. I tried everything in the books and never worked. And so when I had Hazel, I was like, oh my God, I finally had figured out Zoe. And I was like, I know what babies need. But then I had Hazel and she needed completely different things. And luckily she was an easier baby. I went from hard to easy, but some people go the other way. Or sometimes you can't have one bottle that every baby's going to take or one lactation tip that makes every breastfeeding journey easy. It has to be individualized care because every family unit is just so unique and everyone has their preferences, and there's just thousands of little things that make us individuals, and that affects how we parent and what the right solution is for us. And
Oh my gosh, I can see that. Building out your team of support is so important, and it's underestimated, and it's so sad because there is a lot of shame around needing help, needing support, needing these resources that keep us from reaching out and asking for help. And so, but just to your point and you sharing these stories, it's so helpful to see the benefits that a family has. And how he interpreted that could have really affected him being able to connect with her and their relationship, however long that would have taken had you not been able to come in and be like, hey, we're going to try this. And within such a short period of time that was resolved, to then help that and just getting to maintain that level of connection with his daughter because of something like that. So I'm really grateful for the work that you do. And I'm really glad that you've been able to share these insights. As we're coming to a close, can you please share where people can connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, my website is called shebirthsbravely.com, and I'm on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all the things under that same She Births Bravely.
Amazing. Oh my gosh, Suzzie, thank you so much for being here today, making time for this conversation. It is really important. The work that you do matters tremendously. And I'm just so grateful for you getting to share and for the women here who are going to be listening and get to learn and glean from your expertise. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you. Well, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And remember that you are not alone. Thank you so much for listening, friend. I cannot wait to talk with you next time. Thanks for listening to Let's Get Real. If you've been feeling stretched thin, stuck in survival mode, or like you've lost yourself in motherhood, I made something just for you. It's called the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide, and it's totally free. Inside, I walk you through simple steps to help you reconnect with who you are, find a bit more breathing room in your day, and start to feel like you again. You can grab it now. Just click the link in the show notes. You don't have to keep doing this alone. Let's take the next step together.